Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori Beth Goldman, and I go by Lori Beth on Facebook. Welcome to episode number 12 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. This is a show that we are now 3 months into. That's been an exciting show where I'm interviewing coaches, healers, teachers, thought leaders, all in the realm of transformation, and really in the realm of what does it mean to truly transform at the core of your being, and what's possible in the realm of transformation. And I'm particularly interested and have brought people on the show who are really exploring the edges of transformation, and transformation as a way of having more of yourself, more intimacy with life, more freedom, more peace, as opposed to necessarily always getting what you want. Because obviously most of us know that that's a losing game to continue to try to get what we want all the time. Sure, sometimes as a natural byproduct, we do get what we want, and that's a beautiful thing. But I'm really interested in the kind of bigger, what I would call sort of like the bigger transformation. So today, for the first time, I am interviewing somebody in my community, Steve Baird, and so he's sitting right next to me on my couch. Kind of feels like revolutionary, we're actually together and not just on video. We are on video together, but getting to have this kind of intimate conversation together. And I'm particularly excited to be interviewing and talking with Steve. He is just an incredible and inspiring human that I have had the privilege to know and live close to. And just from the very first moments of meeting Steve, I just felt so much ease in my being, and such a welcoming invitation. And really, it actually, I feel like kind of his essence and his being, he's sitting next to me, but I'm going to talk about you since I'm introducing you, just really emanates this sense of it's a sense of freedom. It's a sense of things being able to roll off, and for us to actually be able to, make light and bring humor and, play with the more difficult aspects of ourselves and our lives. And so I really appreciated, I feel like every single time I'm around Steve, so much gets revealed in my being. And one of the things that over a dinner conversation with several of us that got revealed was Steve's, there were many realizations, many little tid points of wisdom that were coming through this one evening. We all spent 5 hours together because we were so engaged. And and Steve coined the phrase high quality realizations. And so I was really interested in having him come on the show, mostly so that people could really could be introduced to him and to feel his magic and his transmission, but also so that we could discuss this particular topic of what Steve calls high quality realizations, which is a realization that comes after you've set the groundwork. It comes from, he can speak more about it, but just as an introduction, I'll say it's a realization that kind of gets into the core of your being after, doing the patient and steady work that we do of, showing up for ourselves and learning and taking responsibility for our lives and our experience. And then when that happens, it's something, a high quality realization is something that completely shifts the course of your life. Maybe something that you've dealt with for a long time gets completely erased. Some new quality comes in that you're able to kind of, that you never had, that feels like a resource, something that's very positive for you. So I wanted to bring him on, and then I think the other important thing I'll say about Steve is that, and why we titled this High Quality Realizations for Your Average Person, is because, Steve, I'm not sure I would say Steve is your average person. I don't know what average person is, but basically, you know, a lot of us who've been in the personal growth world or the spiritual growth world, you know, we have a lot of practice under our belts, and we have all these different ways of articulating our journey and, you know, how to bring in more mastery around things, how to let go of things. And what this conversation is really going to be about is that, you know, your average person, your mainstream person, maybe who's never had any, they've never been introduced to spiritual practice, but they're interested in making a shift in their lives, and there's a sort of humbleness and an openness to that process. So that was a long introduction today, but I want to hand it over to Steve, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Lori. You're just a gem to come into my life. It's been very wonderful. You're so articulate. It's so inspiring. It really is.
Oh, thank you.
I coined that phrase, high quality realizations, later after I got sober. But I started having them right away. I didn't realize what was happening. I had got charged with a DUI, and I was going to court to fight it. And I was ignorant of my situation. I was in delusion. As part of that, I had to get an evaluation of my drinking, and so I got an evaluation of my drinking, and the evaluator told me clearly I was an alcoholic. And in that moment, the realization was, of course, I was an alcoholic. I drank just like my father. He was an alcoholic. But it went deeper than that. It was like, if I passed by something so obvious, what else in my life had I passed by? And it turned out that practically all my perceptions were inaccurate. I had sent myself down a rabbit hole of self-hatred and self-destruction, and due to perceptions that I picked up from a violent childhood. And they were just all inaccurate. They were not correct. And I always had a feeling in the back of my head that was true. But the feelings were so strong, they carried me forward. And having that realization, that was a high quality realization. It stayed with me. It shifted me from going down the rabbit hole to coming back out. It's like, okay, I put myself in outpatient treatment for alcoholism. I engaged an alcoholic counselor. I went to AA. I got a sponsor. I got a psychiatrist. They had to pump me full of some lithium and some antidepressants in order to bring my manic depressive episodes together. And I got to work. And the realizations came pretty steady over 3 months for sure. And they have come since then, but over 3 months, it was like realizing one thing after another. You know, I was not the most evil piece of shit the universe ever coughed up. Now, where did I get that notion? You know, I mean, but the feeling was so strong. It's like my logical, rational mind could not counter it. And it just sent me deeper down that rabbit hole. So it was one step after another, you know, and I used my anger and rage at the fact that I had essentially given away 44 years of life to self-destruction, you know, when I didn't need to power me to become in a constructive life, a life based on love, compassion, you know, heartfelt openness, all those things that were foreign to me, but I've come to really love and embody as much as I can. And it's possible for anybody to do this. It's not easy, you know, the habitual patterns that we build up and our attachment to what we are. I remember in AA, there's what they call 12 steps, and there's a 5th step when you talk to somebody about all the things you did that were wrong and all the things. And I remember being attached to being the most evil thing in the universe. It was like I wanted to be the most something. And that's the thing I had picked, Lori. And I didn't know, and it was so illuminating for me to see the fact that there was a part of me that didn't want to let that go. And I, you know, because it was known, I knew it. I had honed it for 44 years. I had worked really hard for it, you know. I had a lot of time and effort in it. But I let it all go. And it didn't happen right away. And I don't mean to imply that high quality realizations means that I had these realizations and to the core of my being, I was transformed. But I was transformed deep enough to continue doing this work. And what I find is that there's just more layers. There's more layers. There's more layers of self-loathing. There's more layers of this. But it gets to be kind of a pale imitation of itself. It gets to be a ghost. It gets to be really sneaky. And so I depend on people around me, my friends, my wife, and people I know to check myself with this stuff to see what I'm doing. Because they can reflect back energy to me that helps those realizations open. It's like, okay. Oh, I thought I was being really nice, but I was really digging at an old wound, wasn't I? And if I'm open to that reflection of energy, then I can go, okay, well, we need to work with this. We need to contemplate this. We need to work with this.
Yeah, there's so much that you said. Thank you for giving that introduction and for your kind of, obviously telling your story, you know, in a vulnerable way. There's so many different pieces, so I want to back up to one, and then maybe we'll see how we'll address others. But I am very curious if you could kind of maybe share with people it seems like you were naming the high quality realization, like the very first one was realizing and taking ownership for you being an alcoholic. And knowing that, of course, the road was not going to be easy, but that something in your being was like, this is right, and I am ready to do this. And I'm curious about that because I know you, and I know the one thing you didn't say is like, you know, obviously for 44, however long you drank, you know, many years of your adulthood, and then, you know, also dealing with a lot of childhood trauma that was never actually processed. That's a big, big, big decision to make. And it obviously, to me, it does seem like a high quality realization because I know in your being, the way you talk about it, it's like, this is the only option. This is it. So I'm wondering if you can kind of speak to like, what paved the way for that? Like, if you can remember, like, what was that kind of moment, and how did it, was there something that happened beforehand? Was it simply just like some part of you came online and was like, all right, this is the truth, and I'm moving forward?
I struggled with this feeling of self-hatred for a long time, and this feeling I was evil. Because I could look out into the world and I could see that I was not Mao, I was not Stalin, I was not Hitler. I wasn't even a very good thug, you know. I just wasn't very good being mean. So I understood that there was something amiss about this feeling. And I did research into evil. I studied the Holocaust. I went to the death camps, and because I was trying to understand what was my feeling about that? Where did I get this compared to this? And this was evil. These people did these things. And, you know, and worked a lot with that energy. But the feeling was overwhelming. And I would say from the age 41, at age 41, I would say that's when I actually gave up. And I was decided that all I had to do was live long enough to get my kids through college and I could die. And I could tell in those 3 years that the part of me that wanted to die was getting stronger than the part of me that wanted to live. And I was just going to be driving one night. I was going to speed up the car and drive into an embankment. And I had 2 sons and I couldn't do that. So I was kind of backed into a corner. And I think, quite frankly, much of what happened to me is like the pressure cooker of all that contained energy just built up and built up and built up until I broke, until I shattered is what I call it. And when I shattered, it was like I was completely helpless and hopeless, and I was willing to do anything. And I did. And I did.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it just speaks to, also just that if we stay with the theme of high quality realizations, that sometimes they come out of, the experience. I've seen many clients who have this experience where it's like they're going along, and then all of a sudden it's like they have an eating disorder, they're severely depressed, like all these things and I've always seen it as the accumulation of energy that has not gotten to be known and felt. It's sort of the healing, the trauma that builds up. Mm-hmm. And so interestingly, I mean, we wouldn't think this, right, about a high quality realization, but those experiences of everything just getting so bad, and really the body and the psyche saying, hello, wake up. Like,
yes.
It's almost like,
yes.
I mean, it's a beautiful thing in some way. We have sort of a self-healing mechanism that says, okay, I need, there's something wrong, here are the alarm bells.
Right.
And so then you can't, one can't kind of ignore it anymore. And I mean, that's been such a huge part of the work that I've done with people, is realize, these people many people who've gone along, especially in childhood, and then they reach, either their late teens or kind of early 20s, or, even farther along, like your age, when you had the realization.
Yes.
And then that just it's like life is saying, I want your healing. Mm-hmm. But I love that as a high quality realization. It's somehow, that high quality realizations can be kind of like messy. They don't have to. They don't look like I just like, wow, I was on the top of a mountain and I had this vision that I was supposed to be doing this work, and now I'm doing this work. It can be. It's really in the grit of life that we that gets birthed.
Yes.
So, mm-hmm.
I think it's one of the delusions that can sidetrack us, is the idea that a high quality realization or any sort of realization will get us there. There being where we feel no discomfort, we're feeling no pain, mm-hmm. we're feeling no suffering. Mm-hmm. My experience with all that is that what it does is it creates equanimity and stillness in me, so that I have the ability to work with my pain, to work with my suffering, and it doesn't overwhelm me. Mm-hmm. It's just like I can work with it instead of it. It's like I can write it instead of it writing me. Mm-hmm. And that's a very, very, it's a high quality realization.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so do you want to speak more about, your journey's been so immense and very inspiring to me, to see where you've come, 44, now you're, I don't know how old you are.
66.
66. So,
yes.
And just like the journey that you've been on, because now, I didn't introduce you in this way, but now, Steve is a I would call him a very serious meditation practitioner. Just got back from a 2-week retreat, and does many retreats a year, and also teaches meditation. But so that's been a huge part of your practice. But then there's all these, one of the things that I really love about you is that it's like you feel like you're your own brand or version, of kind of what you've lived through, the realizations that you've had, and kind of like how that then gets translated to others, And that's, I think the night we had dinner, that was really what the high quality realizations were. It was like these little pith statements that everybody was like, oh yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Or, there was a kind of knowing of something. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, maybe you could speak to just a little bit about your journey from then to now, and maybe even highlighting, if you can, some of these, some of the more kind of potent, and maybe like, I would want to say potent and even daily kind of, high quality realizations that you're really living into.
Well, the first year after sobriety was very intense, because I was really directing a lot of energy to healing. Mm-hmm. I was nervous that it took me 44 years to get here, and I didn't have 44 years to get back. And it moved actually quite rapidly. It took concentrated time. It's a little hard sometimes to remember what it was like, because it was so chaotic. I had a dream for numbers of years before this happened, where my emotions were in me and they were contained in this cement container. And, you know, things were blowing out of the top and the container was kind of all cracked. And I had cement trucks coming in and they were pumping cement on the top, trying to keep the emotions down. And
Wow.
and people told me, they kept telling me, and I don't remember exactly the context of all this because I was pretty stressed out, that I needed to feel my emotions. And so in one day I sat down in one powerful visual meditation, I blew that container up. And I don't recommend that anybody does that. I was probably lucky I survived it. So I had this whole persona I had built up, and this whole personality and the way I was, and all that just disappeared. It shattered into a million pieces. And the major realization from there was that no matter who I think I am, no matter how hard I build something, and this is Steve, that it'll disappear like that. It can just, it's ephemeral. And so from that moment on, I would say the high quality realization there was uncertainty. It's all uncertain. There's nothing that is solid. It's all in process. And as terrifying as that was, and it was terrifying, there was also so much relief. Man, I felt so tired after that. I didn't realize how much energy it took to try to keep things really constricted when they wanted to flow. And so then it was the hard work. First I had to take care of some of the manifestations. I had manic depressive attacks where I was up for like 7 days, and I don't know what happened afterwards, the depressions, I don't remember. So I had to work through the emotional states. What I had to do basically was to take the hatred and convert it into love and compassion. And as I did these symptoms started to dissipate. And when you know it, as soon as one dissipated, the next one kind of popped up.
Yeah.
It was like that, one after another. But I kept after it. I was determined to have what I could see other people have. I saw people who had been through things much worse than I had been through, who were living lives that seemed fairly contented, fairly compassionate, fairly loving, and were helping other people and loved themselves and respected themselves. And I wanted some of that, and I got it. And so that's kind of how I worked through it, was step after step. And in about 2001, when I worked through my PTSD, was the last of, let me see how I can say this. For a lot of years, the self-hatred and the self-destructive techniques and all the trauma were not memories. They were day-to-day living events in me. They were like the basis for me. You know, you touch me in a certain way and I get angry. I go all the way back to when I was 5, bring it all back and express that. And around 2001, what started to happen was I started to get what I called, and this was a real high quality realization, current. So that if, say, Lori said something that I respond with anger, I would respond with anger proportional to that very moment. In proportion to whatever it was, not going all the way back. It was like I was no longer living in that energy, and that energy started to become a memory. And I really like it as a memory.
Well, what I love about what you're sharing too is that one is that it really feels like you're talking about the process of healing, and it feels like one thing that I heard is that you were able, and I think this is so helpful for all of us, right? But you were able to see people outside of you that you felt like had made it through. And so that was kind of like an encouragement to you.
Yes.
Like a sort of a place that you aspired to be. And I'm sure that partly was coming through AA and some of your sponsors there, but also just through other humans that you knew, wow, this person has been through a lot and they have been able to, you know, move through it and find peace and find happiness. But then the other piece that I really love about what you shared is that, I mean, I think this is why I love being in your presence and just connecting with you around all kinds of things, but especially around healing, is it feels like you really went through your own journey and you owned it as yours. Like even the process that you just said of letting all the layers come up and working with them with love and compassion, and to the point where you actually, you know, for yourself got to the place of working through the PTSD, you know, and being able to then, like you just said, have events happen that were current. And that just kept kind of like, the more you actually opened and confronted and faced with courage all of the emotions that were kind of arising in your experience, and you at the same time were cultivating this sense of love and compassion and holding of it, the more that they would bubble to the surface and you would be able to release them. And then that has led to like huge healing and huge freedom for you.
Yes. Oh, yes. You remember after the PTSD passed, and I was studying Buddhism, and I had been meditating since I got sober. But I was kind of meditating in a way to reinforce my ego rather than dissolve it. And it was around 2010 that I understood that and changed what I did. And this was so, I really love this part. It was so extraordinary. My wife and I, we don't punch each other's buttons. We lean on them. We just have personality types that line up so that we just are right on them. And the great thing about that is that we've had to disarm those buttons in order to stay together. We've had to work through that because otherwise we'd never made it. We're still working on it, actually.
But it's been about 20 years, right?
It has. And it's just got to be so sweet and so compassionate and so much more loving between us. It's been an amazing journey. But what I noticed when I started meditating with the purpose of dissolving the ego, let's say, is that my reactivity went way down. And this is the first 6 months. And my ability to be present went way up. The change was so noticeable that my wife followed me into the Buddhist lineage I was studying with and has become a member herself because she wanted some of that too.
Can you talk about the process of dissolving the ego? What were the practices or?
For me, it was mostly the practice of sitting meditation, shamatha, which is following the breath, and then vipassana, which I think of as contemplation. You concentrate the mind, calm the mind down, so then you can contemplate series of questions. And the Buddhists have a whole line of serious things to contemplate, but my mind provided me with so much material. I never really have got to much of that, you know. And staying with that. I mean, one of the things that happens with meditation is that when I still my mind, that which I've been running from, that which I've been ignoring, that which I've been repressing rises. And it's a real opportunity to work with that material because that material is working me, you know. And so what I can tell you is that I've watched it happen over time, Lori. It's been amazing. It's like the reactivity drops, right? The ability. And then what that means is that when my button is pushed, I don't respond out here, but it's going on in here. You know, you can see my bald head probably shining during those moments. And what I've noticed over time is that the interior reactivity is dropping away, and I'm experiencing more and more stillness, is what I would call equanimity, but I experience it as stillness. So something happens that would normally punch my button, and it's just still. There's no response. And I really love that. I do. Because otherwise, with all the button pushing, I'm just like a robot. It's like, push this button and watch Steve do this, and push this button and watch Steve do that. And
well, it sounds like also through the process of that it helped, it shifted your locus of your focus outside to inside.
Yes.
Like as there was less reactivity inside, there was more space for you to see the kinds of triggers that were the sort of your buttons being pushed, and to feel it.
for me, it was not, it has gotten more lately, but the first years were not so much contemplation or vipassana as it was just sitting and feeling emotion.
Yeah, okay.
Sitting and feeling emotion. Sitting, and then I had this whole process like where I would close my eyes and I would go to where the emotion was in my body. I would go there without without a story, without trying to change it, and I would, with as much compassion, I'd move as close as I could, and then I would try to see if it had a taste or a flavor or a shape or a smell or something, and then I would practice holding it in my arms like you would a child, and I call the cradle love and compassion. Because my personal experience with all these emotions is all they want to do is be felt.
And loved.
And loved. Yeah, felt and loved. And when I do that, they would be expressed, and then they would go, and the next one would come up. And so that has been a major transformation technique. And I did that. That was my major practice for a lot of years, which is feeling. Because as a man, my experience was that, I get sad, I get angry, I get happy, I get angry, I get grief, I get angry, I get joyous, I get angry. Everything would run in this one big trough in the center of my head. And so I had a whole range, a whole palette of emotions to get to know and to feel and to understand. And it's been glorious. It really has. It's been just so freeing. So much liberation. Yeah, so much. It's only been the last few years that I've started to do more and more of the cognitive stuff, because I've seemed like I've gotten to where I can feel joy. I can feel happiness.
When you say more of the cognitive stuff, you mean?
Well, it's like
contemplating,
actually contemplating questions and whatnot, Yeah.
Well, it's so interesting because I feel like what you're describing of kind of going into the body and feeling what's there and allowing it and holding it without the story. I mean, that's also been my journey. I started intensively meditating in my early 20s and had been completely dissociated, had gotten so confused about what I was feeling. So I remember the early days of practice just being able to, oh, this is that feeling, and locating it in the body. So that's first and foremost. It just helps us to know ourselves so much more deeply.
Right.
And what it makes me also think about is, I just feel like what you just described so beautifully is, to me, at the basis of all healing. Like the healing work that I do with clients right now, that really is kind of my own over the years. I've really kind of honed in on it, is really about letting go of the mind and going into the body, feeling, helping people to feel their emotions, opening to them, and then that often, we often follow that, and it can lead to a core wound, or it leads to something that on the surface of it may not even seem like it, it might seem different than what you kind of came in with, right?
Right.
But if we can really create that environment to allow, to just be with, to be present with, to allow the sensation, I love the embracing the sensation, it will it's going to move into what it needs to move into. It's going to transform.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just love you describing that, because it just feels like, there's so many different healing modalities out there, and there's so many different ways to manipulate within healing, but not in a negative way, but there's so many different ways to go in. But to me, it is that basic practice that anybody can begin to do by themselves, of simply being present with our internal experience that, is like such a profound game changer.
It is. It's so fun. I mean, I work a lot around men who anger is still their major emotion, and I go to these retreats and stuff, and I talk to them, and I always say, now I come back, I'm gonna see your tender, open heart, you know, and they're like, oh, back. But I find that, you know, if you can be open with communication with that sort of stuff, it's not threatening to people, and it's just open, and it's fun, and it's kind of laughed, and then things can move a little bit. Things can happen a little bit. You know, I find that I think that your soft, tender, open-hearted heart can sneak up on you. It can a little bit, you know.
Well, I also love, I know you have a real interest in working with men and helping men to really feel their feelings. And, you know, I think culturally it's, especially when we look at like your average person, not the person who's so steeped in, you know, spiritual practice and personal growth, but there's such a need to just help, we'll say in this case, all of us, but I think specifically for men, because there's so much conditioning around not feeling. To help men to just, you know, to actually be in their feelings and make it okay. Do you want to speak a little bit about that and sort of what I know that that's a passion of yours and something that you're stepping more into in your life is, you know, wanting, supporting, you know, different men in groups. I'm curious if you want to speak to you know, the importance of that for you and the passion that you have around that.
A couple of things I noticed. One that I try to work with men in particular is there's this whole idea of spiritual experience, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, and it has kind of evolved into this thing that is way up in the heavens, and that, you know, if you do get enlightened, then people will see you coming down the street and put rose petals in front of your feet, and they'll take care of you and all this sort of thing. And I lobby for what I call mundane spiritual experience, for working people who got a job and kids. And it's the sort of thing that you can transform everything and continue to work, it's not this way off thing. It's something that you can take, it's like a wrench to a nut. It's a tool that you can use in your life to change yourself in ways that will make you a more free and liberated human being, more effective, more loving, more compassionate, more open, more helpful. And, you know, that there doesn't have to be, you know, the ray beams coming down from the heavens for that. This is just like, this is very common blue collar stuff. It really is. So I try to work with that. And with, there's two trails with working with men. One is maybe through the 12-step program, somebody comes in and they've already shattered. And so you've got an opening. So if you can get a heart-to-heart connection going, if you can show that you're not better than him, that you're grateful that you're helping him because he's helping me, and make that heart-to-heart connection, have some trust, then something can happen. Something can happen. We have this routine where people come in, and as if you were to actually show them compassion, they would run screaming out the door. So you don't. You tell them to shut their mouth. You tell them that you'll tell them when they can speak. And you're kind of, what would look from the outside, kind of abusive. But the truth is, what we're doing when we do that is all around him, the men are showing each other compassion. And we're showing ourselves compassion. And then after a while, we start slipping him a little bit of compassion. And pretty soon, he's changed. He's transformed. He doesn't even know what happened. It's an amazing thing to watch happen. It is. It is. It can take a long time.
Well, it's meeting people where they are.
Yes.
It's so beautiful. Yeah.
Yes. And then with men that I meet in the regular world, I just try to be an example of a compassionate, open-hearted, liberated man.
You have to try. You just are.
That's just what I do. And then when people ask me about what I'm doing, I will tell them, but I also don't shy away from it. I mean, I talk about what I'm doing and what happened to me and how it goes. And some men don't ever want to talk to me again, and some do, and some do. And so it's the kind of work that is painstakingly slow kind of have to let go of my own desires and wants for how I want to see people transform and change. But it is, and amongst my age group at 66, I mean, you know, men tend to be more set in their ways. It's kind of like they bet 66 years on this, and they're not necessarily so willing. But I see in the younger generation, my son's generation, and all these young men coming together in groups to try to learn how to feel their emotions, and have men support them in doing it, and it's very inspiring. It really is. It makes my heart sing to see that happen, you know, amongst men. And so that's kind of what I do, and it's you know, anybody who wants to talk about it, or anybody who wants to help with it, I help all I can. But the one thing I've noticed is that it's like we all carry our wounds, and if you probe into the wounds, you cause pain, and they close up. And if you don't probe into their wounds, but you show them your scar tissue, you know, and you talk about your wound and scar and how it healed, then it's all the difference in the world. You know, I find that anything that's effective starts with me sharing from myself about how I am and what's going on without pointing at them.
Yeah, beautiful. I love everything that you're sharing. It's like, it's so simple on the one hand.
Yes.
And yet it's just human, like, kindness and decency, and kind of really tracking and attuning to the moment, and okay, what does this person need? You know, obviously with the I mean, I think we all obviously are capable of it, and I know in your case it's like, and I think for many of us who are wanting to spread healing on the planet, it's like, you know, it can be just a way of life. It's like, how am I relating to the person in the grocery store? You know, how. And that's one of the things that I particularly love about you, and really noticed from the first moment that we met, was just that scent. Like, to me, I feel you as just an embodiment of kindness, and you know, and just like of spreading that healing just by being in your presence. And I think we can just go, I mean, it lights me up and it inspires me to want to be more of that in my own, in my life. And I just think that it's like, so everything you're talking about, it's the simplicity of that, like, is some of the deepest healing that's possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's kind of like creating a space for all of us just to feel who we are, just experience who we are, you know. And if that space can be safe, if it can be trusted in that space, that container. And so that's what I try to do. I just try to be a safe space, you know. And I get that feedback. I mean, I had a 2-week retreat. We were in noble silence from the beginning to the end. At the end, we had an hour and a half that we talked, and a woman came up to me and says, you know, Steve, one thing that really buoyed me through this whole retreat was how happy you were. You know, and I thought, I didn't even know what she was talking about.
I know what she's talking about.
You know, I was like, what? We're in noble silence. I mean, you know, but you know, and I hear that from time to time, and it's just an affirmation of what I'm doing is working. It's working. I am more open-hearted and liberated and free, you know. And nobody spreads rose petals where I walk, or wants to put me on an altar or anything. I'm just a 60-year-old blue-collar working guy, you know. That's what I do, and I work, and I talk to people, and I grocery shop, and I do my laundry and wash the dishes, and all that stuff. And so it can have just such utility in our lives.
I love that. It has utility, and it also, it's like, I mean, you're so humble in all of this as well, and in the way you just described yourself, but there's something about that has even a more far-reaching, it feels like it's more far-reaching, that you're just an embodiment of that kindness, of that compassion, you know, of the teachings that you've internalized, you know, from all the years of your own practice and your own healing.
Right.
That then others get to you know, they just feel that, and then that's an opening in and of itself for more healing. Like, what does he have? Like, how is he, you know,
Yes.
how does he have that kind of
Yeah.
laughter, that
Yeah.
sort of, you know, brightness to him? And then especially I think with you, like, you know, you so generously share your story if it comes up in different ways, right? But then it's just a natural kind of sharing in that realm. Yeah, it's just, it's so beautiful. It's such a refreshing, you know, with so much that's out there, it's just a very refreshing kind of way of being, and also way of teaching and way of modeling.
Yes, yes, yes. Sometimes I think of healing as kind of a bubble, and all around it there's all these different modalities. And it's finding, if you can, find the modality that most works with your personality, your type and whatnot, and then using that, because that'll be the most efficient.
Yeah.
But if you can't, you know, you know, you just grab whatever you can sometimes, and that's what you work with, you know, because there is a danger. I discovered early on in just moving from modality to modality,
Of course.
you know, without ever settling down in something. That was kind of like, I realized later, my realization was that what I was doing was like taking spiritual books and reading the table of contents, and then moving to the next spiritual book and reading the table of contents.
Yeah. Well, and also that it takes patience and persistence, and
Yes.
it takes, you know, I mean, that's definitely been something that, yeah, I personally have struggled with, is, you know, I've tried many, many different modalities, however, and also, you know, landed in those that I use.
Right.
And have had periods of time where I use some more than others, but I really have also come to the same conclusion. It's like the practices that I've done the longest, the things that I'm consistently doing, those make the most lasting change. But there was something else I was going to say about what was I going to say? Anyway, I don't know, I lost my train of thought. We'll see what comes next.
Yes.
But just, yeah, that it is, this is what I was going to say, but also the patience
Yes.
of a path.
Yes.
You know, I think that can be for all of us, and, you know, I see this a little bit in the, like, spiritual personal growth marketplace. It's like, there's this 6-week course and this 8-week course, and this is going to take me here and take me there, and yet, you know, in my experience, and I know in your experience, and those of us who've been on the very long path, like, I fought it for years. I really wanted it to happen quickly.
Yes.
And the reality is that it's a very slow process of simply showing up moment to moment and being with ourselves. And whatever modality you're using, it's another way of opening to the feelings, letting them release, you know? And so I just think that there's so much wisdom in what you just shared, and so much importance for everyone.
Yeah. It's just, it is always the thing I want to leave with, is that, you know, it's all doable.
Yeah.
You know, it's all doable. It's just one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And the consistency is like, what was I heard one time about the way to walk the spiritual path? 1 is to begin, and 2 is to continue.
That's awesome.
And I don't mean it to sound like I've always been like just on this path going like this. I mean, I have paused for periods of time, and there's been periods of times I think, God, maybe I really got there now, you know, maybe I'm finally there. And of course I wasn't. It's just, it's a lifelong path. It's a lifelong thing that just keeps going, you know. And so, but I've experienced all that, you know, and yeah.
Well, wonderful. That feels like a pretty complete kind of time, unless you have anything to add.
No, I don't.
Great. Do you want to tell people who are watching or who will watch later how they might find you if they were interested in knowing you or working with you in some way? What would be the best way?
The best way would be to call my home phone and leave a message.
This is how we are in Port Townsend.
I'm old school. I got a landline, and I'm not very technologically up to date. But my phone number is 360-385-7771. Call, leave a message for Steve, and if you want to talk, get together, have coffee, or do anything, I'm quite willing to do that. I'd be honored to do that.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Yeah, this has been really fun, and also fun to do it in my living room.
On the purple couch.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, my name is Lori Beth Goldman, and I go by Lori Beth on Facebook, and I'm a psychotherapist and a healer and a coach. And I offer, currently, my offerings are in flux right now and are about to change, but all of my offerings right now are one-on-one, and I like to work in longer containers with people. And my gift is to work through deep trauma and do healing work. I have my own way of, I've basically created my own modality that really works with the body and the emotions and the energetic body, and gets to the root of, you know, the wound, and we're able to be with it, love it, and also let it go. And I really love working with women, especially, who are wanting to rise from the darkness. You've had a hard journey, and you know, you've either really struggled, you've either had a, you know, felt pretty good in life, but there's sort of this deeper emptiness and struggle that you are ready to face with someone who can really take you there and like do that kind of powerful, beautiful work together. Or you're a woman who, you know, you have been in personal growth and spiritual practice, and you've done a lot of healing work, and you still can't seem to move through some of the everyday anxiety, depression. Maybe you've had a clinical diagnosis, and you know, there's a lot of hopelessness and despair. I have lived this journey, and this is the work that I most love taking women through, because if I have lived through it and basically gotten to the other side, I know that it's possible for you. So yeah, stay tuned for, I'm going to be offering and writing a lot more about that and coming on video, but for now, that is the beginning, little tease of that. And thank you for tuning in, and I will see you with someone else next week at this same time, 1 p.m. And yeah, blessings everybody. Bye.